So I've had a very interesting morning this morning. It's 6 o'clock now, but my morning began at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I noticed a message that had like somehow I'd missed it, and it was a young academic from overseas reaching out, and he wanted to know about what I had to say about the Christchurch mosque shootings, and pretty much I told him what I said in my book State Secrets about David Tipple and the weapons that I'm quoting an activist group, and they did a design called Peace Link, and they talked about basically Chinese weapons that were making their ways into the hands of the Contras via David Tipple and Gun City, according to them, and that's and I talked about that in relation to the various skinhead groups who are operating in Christchurch, including people like Carl Chapman, who was part of the New Way Trust, which was funded by the government from 1995 to 2014. Obviously, they didn't do any clearly auditing because eventually Kyle got his hand caught with the cookie jar, and he packed it up and he went back to Christchurch and he created the right wing resistance group, which Ethan Talling, Australian soldier who ended up in the Ukraine war, was involved in fighting with, and he says that he was recruited by Kiwis from this organisation, which was founded by Carl Chapman, who was a Christchurch employee, even at the time when he's a ex guy that had bombed a fire church, and he kept on saying he was going to repent in his ways, and he kept on getting caught doing naughty, dirty things. And I talk all about that in my books, which are they're available on my website. So if you want to read the pages, and the State Secrets comes with an index, so you can put in these things like National Front and so on. And I don't name Kyle Chapman in the book, but read the details about that page on Gun City and the other Christchurch employees and their links to these sort of Iran Contra cowboys, and you'll see that who I'm talking about once you look up the details I'm just explaining right now. And so we started talking, and he came up with some very, very interesting information. And one of the things which we know, which is actually that the Christchurch shooter used a specific IP address when he was making these comments on iChan and 4chan, which somehow intelligence agencies actually managed to miss. Now, you might remember I previously said that the idea was that when it happened, the authorities came out and said, oh, we didn't know this was going to happen because we weren't monitoring those channels. But I say, well, wait a minute. I've got a front page newspaper article from the Otago Daily Times in 2015 that says you're talking nonsense, because it says you shut down Otago University because these threats would be made on the same platforms. Now, of course, just a sidebar to that is that those platforms were set up by Ron Watkins and then his son James Watkins, he was an ex-Army US intelligence, ex-US Army chopper pilot trained in information warfare and cyber warfare, who then set up in the Philippines and then created these QAnon sites. So the idea that they could disseminate all these, basically what they do is they take hold of a real conspiracy or something that's really got truth on it, and then they mix it all up with their own nasty, little ugly politics, and then they just totally confuse the situation while garnering votes for themselves, but making it very hard for independent journalists to actually, be heard, because we just get told that we're right wingers because we're, the idea is that we can't own the enemy, then we'll just buy them out. So anyway, so they were making these comments on 4chan, 8chan, which they shut down the university, and so their idea that they weren't monitoring, well, that's not kind of true, but it gets better because I've also mentioned who previously academics in Auckland University have looked at the spellings in the manifesto, which, by the way, the shooter said he was in contact with Andrew Breivik and borrowed a lot of his stuff on the manifesto from Andrew Breivik as well, which we'll get back to in a second. But the shooter was writing this, 1,600-page manifesto stuff, and he had all sorts of made the same common spelling mistakes or put commas in the wrong place. We all do it. So, but it kind of like leaves you like a signature. And the academics were saying, "Wait a minute, we're finding the posts that he's made actually track back to 2015 at the time when this was going on at Dunedin University, and they shut it down because of the concerns of what they were seeing," which they said later on said, "Oh, we weren't monitoring it." But it gets even better, because according to this young guy I was speaking to, they actually tracked that you've got a Pacific IPS address. So we can actually not only just match up the spelling mistakes from the manifesto with what we're seeing them doing on the thing, in theory, we could actually track down the IP address of those posts and see which IPS address they lead to. oddly enough, the government doesn't want to actually unleash that information. And that's the stuff that would give you the smoking gun. And in fact, a lot of it won't come out of because it won't come out of the police. And the reason why the police aren't keen to admit it is because, as I've talked to you about, the weapons that like again, I tied them into the Dunedin pistol and rifle clubs, which are clubs which have got links and gain to people like the Jeff Todd Security Group, which is a group that's got not only do they train kind of people in mercenary tactics, but they have a lot of people that were sort of quite interested in their defence. Martial arts in the 80s and the 90s, that a lot of these guys had kind of like right-wing neo-Nazi ties to things like the Row Knights and the Southern Vikings. Again, nobody in New Zealand wants to talk about those Southern Vikings or Row Knight connections because it all starts coming awfully back to your own chickens and roosters, right? So they were these guys were like basically training with Jeff Todd and stuff, who's got this lovely sign of symbol of a knight's helmet with two cross swords, just like the Row Knights had a knight's helmet with two cross axe, and just like this guy Andrew, Brenton Tarrant was trying to make out like he was a knight, crusading knight, and just like Andrew Brevik is trying to make it like he's a crusading knight, and just like Jack Stubbs, who's another dodgy person from the spooky world of spooks and shadows, can be found running around setting up all these fake degrees and fake think tanks that are all like masking themselves out as hardcore QAnon, not crusaders against white purity. And so anyway, the emails were from basically Brenton Tarrant to the Andrew Brevik, but also to the Pistol Club. So he reached out specifically to them and said, I'd like to come and I'd shoot at your club. And we're asking the question about, well, why did he choose that club? And I've again said it's got all this background history. People like Peter Breedler, former soldier, went to the club, found all these Confederate flags flying up there, went, no, this is not right, told the police, made them a comments on Facebook, and they ignored him, along with other people. And there are more witnesses that will be named at a given time. And there are people out there who are not stupid and are doing this, and not just in a QAnon way, like in a very academic, high-level way. So they do these emails, which they say, yeah, we're going to go to this club, and so, these clubs got all this, this connections. And Peter Breller is saying, well, hey, what's going on here? So at the Royal Commission, they make him out to be a liar, because at this point, the police who fumbled the ball when he's warned them about the club, who at the same time then turn around and lose like 25,000 rounds when the pistol club gets broken into and the books get stolen. So there should be like a massive, like security eye of Sauron on that club right now. But despite all these complaints and all these screw ups, no, don't detect a single thing. And then they send themselves to investigate themselves. And now they won't tell us where the IP address is, because it's going to confirm the fact that actually they lied their fucking asses off. They were told about this threat. They knew about the threat. They even took action, but then they choose not to do anything about it. Now it gets even weirder, because it turns out the SIS we also know about the 3 terrorist exercises. What you don't know is in this there was a computer simulation which covers this exact scenario. Again, slightly talked about in the media, but not too much. But instead, what it doesn't tell you is in the simulation, it actually has the mosque. The mosque is the target. It's not just that it's an online scenario. It's actually saying, this is going to be the thing that what would happen if this scenario occurs? And it turns out to be exactly how they're told. So, like, they were told the target, they had all this intelligence, they had even had a plan for what would happen in that event, and yet it's still, when it happened, that managed to go through their fingers. The other interesting piece about this guy that's talking to is that he also worked in IT, and so he gives me one little thing was that when you go, if you're going down around the Hagley Park and you go past the mosque and you're heading away from the coast, so you're heading sort of towards, as you going through Hagley Park, and as you're heading through, you turn right, and that will take you up Riccarton Road. And if you head up Riccarton Road, there was a little site there where they have an IP address which handles all the computers for the flow address. So I always along the lines of, why couldn't they have just cut that out? At the same time, we know from the GoPro, this is the GoPro that So Kelvin Alps is telling us that he's gone and brought a digital expert to do an academic study that shows that the pistols were firing airsoft weapons. Well, okay. First of all, your expert is not a forensic expert, Calvin. That's what you need is a ballistics expert for that. That's like, when I was in the armed forces, one of my jobs was artillery intelligence. Like, that's in my alley. I know nothing about the digital stuff and have to go and talk to people to find that stuff out. And your guy, he's actually would be better off actually analysing the video, but he doesn't talk about the video, which is really funny because it's a GoPro 400. It was set to maximum settings so that they could, power as much footage as possible before it ran out of battery, but it affects the key resolution, which is why you get all these glitches. So all these things that you're running around trying to make out like they're shooting softball, you can't tell that. You can't tell it because the software, it's such a grainy footage, it won't allow you to do that stuff. And if he's a digital expert, he should know this. And I loved it, and I still haven't got hold of your report. I must get hold of that report and go and have. So I can't wait to get hold of your peer review experts from Thailand, because I've got a good idea where that rabbit hole leads as well. Probably back to the Philippines, I'm guessing. Anyway, no, let's not carry on from speculation. Let's stick going. So on the other hand, we know from following that we're driving along in about 12, give or take about 12 minutes, it cuts out the video, and we know right on that spot if you like going in the opposite direction. So instead of going towards Rickenham Road direction, now heading out towards the beach. So you go all the way down and then you turn right and it takes you into Stanmore Road, and then you do a quick zip zap and you're onto Linwood Avenue, and that's where the second mosque is. So the shooter's going straight down that one-way system, and at 12 minutes approximated, which is what we did where we worked out the conditions for the day and drove them several times, and basically it all averaged at about 12 minutes, was you find yourself at a big pyramid building, which is on the back of the pyramid building is the Barbados Cemetery. That used to be that was the headquarters for Southern Police headquarters for police intelligence, and it got abandoned after the Christchurch call, but there's a big transmitter there which is still active, and it's right, there's a whole big security CCTV camera all over the area there. And so a lot of people talked about how that localized area, their phones went out at about the same time, and he's saying it would make more sense to actually use the transmitter to jam it than to turn off the IP system, which would be basically, it would shut down everything for everybody in Christchurch, which would have all sorts of things like banking consequences and so on. So that kind of adds another little kind of equation to the forensics there. I'm talking to this guy backwards and forwards now at the moment, and he's really good. Like, he does all the right meticulous. I'm not going to tell you what he does, how he does it, because I don't want to ruin his. There will come a time we will talk about that stuff, but he knows what to look for, how to ask for it. He's just freaking good. And I know I said there's people at him that's overseas, and there's people at Auckland University, and there's people at Christchurch University. There's some very clever people that have been very patient about this. So if you want to go and listen to people that want to give you instant garbage, that it's an airsoft pistol with bogus experts that really aren't actually experts, knock yourself out. I'm personally not that impressed. But anyway, that's enough. I think that's I'm gonna go and take a bit more note taking and go into some of the stuff in a bit more depth on my show today. I'm going to broadcast a show today, so it'll probably kind of get towards the beginning of my summer season. But he's going to be a lot to go on today, so it should be a bloody good show, and I'll be able to sit down and write down and check out a few more things. So if you want to learn more, go to my show. It's the Deadline Report. We're on Fresh FM. We broadcast on Fridays and Sundays at 1 p.m. I'm not sure what the call signs are. There's about 4 or 5 of them up in our Melbourne area. Or you can go to Fresh FM's website directly and go to the podcast, the Deadline Report. You'll find it there, which will probably, if I broadcast it or record it today, then it'll be shown on this Friday or come out the following Sunday, and then of course go up on the podcast. You can see it whenever you actually want to. Or you can come to my website when I put it up for the Shipping News 50, which will be www.postmanproductions.com, the Shipping News, which we're probably going to turn very shortly into the Deadline Report to kind of start consolidating everything. But yeah, it's and we've been working very hard on the radio show, and we're still not quite there, but it's getting to be something that I think is going to be. We're going to start having some impact. Well, we're already having impact, but we're going to knock it up again for next year, and this summer season will be the beginning of what you can expect to hear as we go from strength to strength. All fingers crossed. May the force be with you, and take it easy out there.